how many editions slash variants is too many? This is like one of those topics that I think, as a playing cards creator myself, I've run into this issue often, and there are reasons why the things happen the way that they do. But I'm gonna actually let Chris Moyer speak on this first, and kind of give his opinion as to what he thinks. How many editions or variants is too many? And if you're in the chat below, feel free to comment what you think is the magic number. And if you're watching this later, leave a comment below as well. Chris Moyer, let us know what you think.
So I think going in this order is perfect because I'm going to speak from the standpoint of a collector, not a creator. I'm in the process of creating some decks, but I haven't created my own yet. So I'm definitely speaking more from a creator standpoint when it comes to this. And I think that there is a sweet spot for sure, because I think as a collector, I want multiple editions. I want a standard. I want something else that's kind of cool. And I want the option to have a gilded deck if it makes sense. But I think for me, it's not necessarily about the total number, but is there something different that justifies that edition? Is it just another color, or is there something distinctly memorable about it, or an exclusivity thing about it, or something that sets it apart from the rest of them, where it's like, you know, we have so many cool ideas with what we're putting together with some of these things that it's like, we want to do them all, but you've got to cool down and like do what makes sense. Because I've seen some campaigns where it's like, let's throw a holo edition in there just for the sake of a holo edition. And it's like, no,
once again,
makes sense with holo. That's another pet peeve for
I'm
sure.
feeling personally attacked.
I'm going to be good at this, I think.
Later, Omar.
Attacking both of you guys. No, I think, you know, there's this sweet spot balance where it's like, I want a certain amount of versions, but I want them to make sense and not feel like it was done just for the sake of adding on like another edition. But like, did it enhance the campaign? Did it make a set like feel cohesive? Omar, I think what you've done a great job with, and here I'll defend you and you'll probably love this for now, is the sheer fact that
carry on.
Yes, absolutely. Is the sheer fact that you've had consistency across your campaigns now. We know that we can always count on a certain amount of colors. We know that we can count on a Dynasty deck. We know we can count on a Prism deck. And so there's consistency now, which I feel like makes sense to me to carry throughout. And you've done it where it's like, okay, well, this part of the series is gilded, or this part of the series has different borders or things. And like with the black border on Beetlebacks, like it made sense. It was distinctly different. And it's like, I would hate to not have that version available. It didn't feel like another extra version to me. It felt like this great idea that set those apart. And it's like, I would want both. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's all about finding that balance of doing things that make sense and giving me a set that like feels good as a cohesive unit. I don't want to just chase it just for completionist's sake.
Right. I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. I think obviously, you know, and CH, I'll let you chime in a second, but I think setting expectations is important, you know, and how in part how you set expectations is through example. You know, like I had, you know, with Parlor, we did 4 decks. With Tempest, we added, well, I mean, it was like 7 total by the time we were done because the campaign did so well, you know, that it was like a surprise to us. We just kept thinking, well, people want, it was right in the middle of a pandemic. We've talked about this where collecting was at an all-time high. And all of a sudden, you know, now we have 7 variations or 7 variants or whatever. I think one of those things that you mentioned, Chris Moyer, I agree with you 150%, is this idea of trying to make every edition special and unique. You know, I believe in standard quote unquote players editions, right? Or like your standard red and blue editions that people can play their, you know, poker with or do their magic tricks with. But I also like having, you know, foil versions that are special, that give a little bit more of something that maybe are a little fancier. You could still use them for gameplay. So you know, you invite your friends over and you're sitting on the poker table and you whip out this special deck that's got the foil and it's got the cool, you know, the bells and whistles, so to speak. And then there's the gilded decks, which I think are collector decks. Yeah. You're not going to see a lot of games being played with gilded decks. They're beautiful in their own right. They're art pieces. That's what we tried to do with the Dynasty series, which also has an individualized back design and an individualized tuck box design, which again are other ways to bring new features and make the decks feel different and interesting. Obviously, with Successor, we had the white edition, which featured a metal plate on. So I try to do things that differentiate the decks and make them feel like they're necessary within the context of what we're doing. With Successor specifically, we have the sarcophagus. That the sarcophagus has 6 slots, and if you're gonna have 6 slots, you gotta have 6 variants, right? Otherwise, it's gonna look weird if you got 4 variants taking up 6. It's just gonna look, it's not quite. It's not. There was always an intention for that. I think intent is the thing, right? Like you're mentioning, not doing a variant for variant's sake. Not throwing hollow foil at a deck just because you're throwing hollow foil at a deck. It's something that's measured and thought out and really planned. What do you think, CH?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm going to have a little different perspective, though.
Okay.
Based on my kind of the where I come from with playing cards, right? So, and I really think it comes down to how you're going to use the cards. You mentioned this a little bit too, Omar. Is it a poker? Is it a magic for a magician, or is it a collector? I think that plays into it, and that's the main reason I have variants. I think is how you plan to use your cards. Me as a collector, do I need 18 different colors of Jerry's Nuggets on my shelf sealed? Probably not. Do I need gilded Jerry's Nuggets? Probably not. But if I'm a magician and maybe I want to use the Jerry's Nuggets, maybe that's, maybe they get worn out. I need some different colors. I like the different colors, right? So it maybe depends. But you look at bicycle, right? I was reading the chat here. I think there was a comment about bicycle about another item related to them. But what are we on? 6 million versions of bicycle decks right now,
right?
Something like that. But they sell, right? And people love bicycle. How many, so if you're talking about variants from that standpoint, I don't think you can, that's a brand, that's pervasive, and you can probably have as many variants as you can imagine. The Wonder decks that we did, we set out, 5 or 6 years ago, and we said, how many of these we really want to do? And I set the limit at 4. I was like, we're going to do 4 colors. And I asked our backers, in the first campaign, what colors do you want? They told me. We ranked them top to bottom, and those are the 4 we did, right? And that's it. We don't plan to do any more of those. I think that's enough. I get requests all the time to do other colors, other variants, but I think 4 is enough for that. I think that the art's pretty much stable. I don't need to just pump out more decks of that. So me personally, I think for a collector, 4 to maybe 8 is plenty for a deck.
Yeah, I definitely think, obviously it depends. It varies. One thing that's gonna dictate how many additions or variants is too many is the demand.
Yeah.
Is the deck in high demand? Is it worth? Is it something that people are searching for? Right? Or something that people want? 3 or 4 different versions of, or 5 or 6 different versions. Some comments that I highlighted earlier that I think are worth mentioning, like for instance, the comment that Theory 11's Warner Brothers deck is too many properties crammed into one deck that really could have used multiple editions. There you go. That's an example of too little, right?
Yeah.
That's too little, too little variants. Yeah. And the other idea is that that gilding can be an egregious thing, that sometimes, all this stuff has to be well thought out, in my opinion, right? Like you can't just throw gilding on a deck that doesn't really feel like it should be gilded just for gilding's sake, right? Like if it's like a bicycle rider back, like does that need to be gilded?
Probably,
in my opinion, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the purpose of that deck. I mean, that deck is really meant for. I mean, today it's magicians, it's everyday poker playing. It's it's an everyday deck. It didn't need to have gilding on it.
Correct. Well, yeah. So let us know in the comment below, guys, if you're watching this after the fact. How many additions or variants do you think is too many? And also, more importantly, what justifies the amount of variants or additions that you think make sense? I'd love to read your comments post, once you watch this.